And hello there, and welcome to Spectrum Debate number 15, whether you are watching on YouTube, Google Plus, or indeed anywhere else. And if you've been visiting our new website, spectrumdebates.com, this week you'll be prepared for what we're doing tonight. Tonight we will, as always, be debating a variety of topics chosen by our guests, whom we will meet in just a moment. But as ever, we want to hear your views, and we want you to send in questions or points to challenge each of our guests. You can do so using this week's hashtag SD15, which is appearing all over your screen, and I'll do my best to put your questions to our guests and to let all of our viewers know what you are thinking. If you are watching on Google Plus, you can also use the Applause app, which tells you how much you agree or disagree with what is being said at any particular time. And any moment now, over at spectrumdebates.com, a poll is launched which will ask who your favourite debater is from tonight. So, without further ado, let me introduce you to each of our guests, and we'll find out who they are and what their topic is. We begin with a returnee. It is John Mousley, who is a supporter of UKIP and is tonight broadcasting to us from Aberystwyth. Good evening, John.
Good evening. I'm John Mousley. I'm a master's student in history here at Aberystwyth University. I'm also a political activist here and back home in Leicestershire.
And what's your topic for tonight?
My topic for tonight will be whether the British government should support the formation of an independent Kurdish state.
Thank you very much indeed. Our next guest is another returnee. It's Leon French, who is a Yorkshire lad, and I'm not sure whether he's coming tonight from Hull or Doncaster, but it's certainly somewhere over the wrong side of the Pennines. Good evening, Leon.
Don't get cheeky. Hello, I'm Leon. I'm a third-year music student at Hull University and also a Conservative local election candidate in Doncaster.
And what's your topic for tonight?
I'll be talking about proposed changes to sickness benefits and why I actually don't agree with them at all.
Thank you very much indeed. Our next guest is another returnee. It's Martin Keegan, who could be coming to us from anywhere in the world, but I do recognise those curtains. So we've been from here before, at least. Martin is not a supporter of any particular party or group, but good evening, Martin. Welcome back.
Good evening. Hello. My topic tonight is the way that trade negotiations between countries internationally affects the regulations that people and businesses, particularly small businesses, have to obey, and the way that that can damage their interests due to the way that these things are carried out non-democratically.
Thank you very much indeed. And our final guest is a new addition to our panel. It's Adrian Cruden, who's here joining us. He is a Green Party parliamentary candidate and activist with a very popular website, which I'm sure you'll find if you go to his Twitter feed. Good evening, Adrian.
Good evening, Gareth. Good evening, everybody. It's nice to be joining you for the first time. I'm like Leon. I'm from Yorkshire, in Dewsbury. My topic tonight is going to be about tax evasion, the evils of tax evasion, tax avoidance, and what we should be doing about it.
Thank you very much indeed. And, of course, I've forgotten to say this the last couple of weeks, but I'm Gareth, I'm your host for tonight, and for full disclosure, I am a Conservative, but I will do my best to play devil's advocate and to challenge each and all of our guests to explore each idea as thoroughly as we can. Our standard disclaimer, of course, is that whilst our guests may well support or be active in any particular political party, none of them speaks for on behalf of that party. So we take everything they say tonight as being their own personal opinions. If you'd like to appear here next week, down below, do get in touch at Spectrum Debates. We already have one guest lined up for next week, and there are 3 more spaces available. And I hope later on after the show on Twitter we'll be announcing a new idea for each of you to help take part in doing a little something on our website called My Manifesto. But without further ado, let's begin our first topic for tonight, and it was chosen before the show began using the laser selection method, and the winner was John. Over to you, John.
Cheers, thank you. My topic basically for tonight is I have come to believe that the Kurds in the Middle East are perhaps one of the strongest allies of the West. As well as this, for years they've been brutally repressed by a number of different countries. And I think it's time for us to show our appreciation of them and some common decency and support the formation of an independent Kurdish state.
Thank you very much indeed. Is there anything that's prompted this as an issue for you tonight?
For a while, I've always nominally been in favour of a Kurdish state, but with the recent conflicts in Syria and northern Iraq, it's kind of shown that the Kurds are not only our allies, but desperately in need of a place to call their home.
Thank you very much. Am I right in thinking, I don't think else can confirm this, but the Swedish foreign minister has recently come out and said that she believes that an independent Kurdistan is something that needs to happen as a matter of priority. I don't know if anyone else picked up on that or if I was dreaming it. Right, let's see. Does anyone want to add anything on this or join in as we start? There we are. You see.
Well, I'd be happy to add very much.
Please do, Adrian.
Okay, well, I very much agree with what John's saying. I think the Kurds have been repressed for decades, if not even centuries. They've been carved up by the countries around them. And I think actually, if you look in the last few years, they have been very much champions of democratic rights and equality in the Middle East. Women in particular have enjoyed pretty much parity in terms of Kurdish society for some years. I think because very much the political traditions are of the left, and I think that has helped to inform that cultural change. But also I think something which has been ignored by the Western media to a large extent has been, for example, the Battle of Kobani. The Kurds who won that town back from ISIS, won the city back from ISIS, are part of the Rojavan state, which has emerged in northeastern Syria during the Syrian civil war. And that is actually, if you look at that, quite an oasis of peace and democracy in a sea of trouble. And I really do think that we must be providing more support to them. I had the honour of meeting Dr. Alan Seymour, who is a Kurdish politician from that area, at the last Green Party conference. And it was fascinating to hear about, for example, how they had been asking for some time for the West in particular to be careful about who they were arming in the Syrian conflict, because they could see what was happening with the emergence of ISIS, and they were very, very concerned about that. So I do hope, and I very much agree with John, that we should be doing something to promote the rights of Kurds, not just within Syria and northern Iraq, but also obviously one of the big problems is the Turkish situation and the situation of Kurds within Turkey.
Thank you very much indeed. Some of the things I've noticed recently, I think Kobani was interesting because that helped, I think, capture many people's imagination to see what was happening in that region and actually helped highlight it. But I was rather surprised and appalled to see how Turkey took the opportunity to have a go at the Kurds who were actually trying to defend Kobani from ISIS. And there are some wider issues here, and I'll be interested to see if anyone else wants to comment on them, because some of the things people have said so far. Salman Anwar at S_Anwar95. You mean go over the heads of our NATO ally Turkey? No thanks. Chris G at Chris G 0000. Recognising Kurdistan means we increase Iranian power over Iraq and upset a NATO ally in Turkey. That's tricky. Bruce Tollerfield at Bruce Tollerfield. The Kurds are currently kicking the shit out of ISIS with an anarchist all-female army. So yes, he says. And what else have we got going on here? Those seem to be the main points that I can see straight away here. Does anyone else?
Can I come in? Yes, please. Yes, please.
Go on.
So, I've always been a fan of self-determination and national sovereignty. But we've seen that it's not always been successful recently. I've been living in Bosnia quite recently, where the territorialization of ethnicity has been the main thing contributing to the instability of that country and that region. We have here Kosovo, where the Muslim Albanian minority has effectively seceded from Serbia and been recognized by about 2/3 of the countries in the world, and it has not improved the situation for quite a lot of the people there. They're no longer being oppressed by the people they were sharing a country with, but they're unable to form a functioning state, and it's descending into crime and anarchy. In the case of an independent Kurdistan, we've got to think, well, what's going to happen to minorities within the Zagros Mountains, within northeast Syria, within the Turkish part of Kurdistan? Why is it that one particular ethnicity, the Kurds, gets to have a state made for them? What happens to non-Kurdish people in the new Kurdistan? Thinking in terms of exclusively selfish Western or European or NATO self-interest and not caring about the Kurds or the other people in the region, it doesn't really help us as much as we might think for us to dismember Turkey, to disrupt the already very complicated balances or imbalances in Iraq and Syria. And if we're worried about being able to get to the energy resources through Azerbaijan, you'd need to have a Kurdistan that bordered Azerbaijan as well to get around Armenia, and that's quite unlikely to be taken in by any sort of Kurdistan. So I'm always worried about moving the borders to go around the people. I'm certainly horrified by moving the people to fit the borders, but privileging an ethnicity rather than democratic consent as the basis for a state, I think is dangerous to minorities, because you give Kurds their state, and then the minorities within the new Kurdish state will say, well, we want our own Turkoman state, or our own Yazidi state, or our own Turkish minority state, or whatever.
Thank you very much. I mean, it's true, isn't it, that in the largest numbers of Kurds live primarily across three governorates in Iraq, 2 provinces in Iran, several areas in Syria, and of course then southeastern Turkey. So in a sense we'd be trying to get 4 countries to give up territory to create a new country.
John didn't say which countries he wanted to take the territory from for Kurdistan, or you are talking about those 4 countries, but in none of those is the Kurdish presence 100% in territories like that. In a lot of places it's 70% or it's 30% or something, and so there'd be a bunch of Turks or Arabs or Armenians or whoever, or let alone Iranians, who are going to become minorities in the country. Now, of course, the Kurds are in a minority right now.
John,
in respect to those countries.
There's been a lot raised there. A few tweets I'll read to you, just because I want you to talk a bit more about this one here. By the way, we've had William Brown at W_O_Brown has tweeted, and I've retweeted the link to the Swedish Foreign Minister. So thank you for that. Chris G, ultimately, if Kurds want their own state, we should support them, but there are bad consequences. For example, pushing Turkey away from the West. Support is totally acceptable, says Bruce Tollerfield. What's tricky is whether or not we should arm them to help combat ISIS. It's a very, very tricky issue. William Brown adds, the problem is with Turkey and NATO is that we've expanded the club of NATO to so many, not all of which we actually support. Salman Anwar, no one says we don't care about Kurds, but Turkey is an important yet fragile ally in the Middle East, maybe more autonomy. John, it's a complex issue. Okay. What do you have to say?
First few things, especially on the treatment of minorities. I think this is a key point. Kurdistan, for a long time now, has been the area where young Iranians, to escape the repression of their home country, go there for holidays. Kurdistan is the place the Yazidis ran to. They didn't run south away from ISIS. They ran north to Kurdistan. As well as this, Kurdistan, the bits where it can elect politicians, Turkey, they always elect people who want a Kurdistan. So I think that's 2 issues where I think we can feel slightly safe. There is the democratic pull for an independent Kurdistan, and they probably treat people better than how they have been treated. On this point of upsetting Turkey, I think this is the main problem we have. Turkey is gradually becoming less and less of an ally to us. If we go along with everything as we have been doing just to please them, I can't see the situation getting any better. So at this stage, I think we have less and less to lose with Turkey. I mean, it's a member of NATO, fair enough. It's been helping ISIS, though. against the Kurds. It's been ignoring the wishes of a section of its population. It's been clamping down on freedom. I mean, the problem with the Middle East is if you do anything there, you will always upset someone. At this stage of the game, perhaps we should upset some people, but then do something good.
Thank you very much indeed. Adrian, I don't know if you want to come back on anything that's been said there.
I could just say with what Martin was saying, that I do understand his concern about something which is purely based on ethnicity. But I think, as John's been rightly saying, if you look at the history of this, minorities within the Kurdish areas have actually enjoyed protection and equality that they haven't really enjoyed in other parts of the Middle East. So I'm not saying that we should forge some sort of ethnic state, but I do think that if you look at how Syria and Iraq came about to begin with, it goes back to the 1920s and the thing in the Balfour Declaration. Sorry?
Sykes-Picot and the Balfour Declaration.
Yeah, yes, the Balfour Declaration, which was an artificial agreement between France and Britain, which effectively carved up the Middle East between two imperial powers. Now, I think if we had been in a situation where somebody had come along and, I don't know, carved out a bit of Germany, a bit of France, and a bit of England, and lumped that together in something, we would probably have some similar issue about how you recalibrate things many decades on when you have that sort of situation. And I do understand the parallel with Bosnia. But
well, in Bosnia, any chance at changing the borders means ratifying ethnic cleansing, right? And that's not exactly the case in Turkey, but it is the case in a place like Iraq.
Well, possibly, and certainly given what's been happening even just in the last few months. So
I'm certainly not trying to defend Turkey.
I'm not arguing we don't have any right to sort of carve bits of countries out of other countries. But the question is, to what extent can we support the Kurds to assert their rights? And I certainly like the idea of more autonomy. And I think that would certainly be something which most Kurds would support in their respective countries. And particularly if you look though at Syria, you have got a situation there where the Yazidis, the Turkomans, Christians are gathered within the area of Rojava and are working very much in concert with the Muslim Kurds. So I think that when we're looking at this situation, it is not, although the headline might sound ethnic, Kurdistan, it's not actually about that. It's more about seeing the political traditions that the Kurdish nation or the Kurdistan, the Kurds have been developing over the last particularly 30 or 40 years, are very much a force for positive change and democratic change in the Middle East, and that we should be recognizing that and lending them more support than they have been, because particularly we've still got the PKK listed as a terrorist organization. That really needs to be revisited and by the West in dialogue with Turkey and with the Kurds.
I don't know if anyone wants to think about this, come back on this particular point. Isn't it true to say that the only, of all those areas that we talked of so far, where there is a predominantly Kurdish population or a significant Kurdish population, the only three areas where there has been stability, in fact it's been a beacon for it in the region, but it's been the only one that would be surely viable, would be the area of the Kurdish regional government in Iraq, so the Dohuk, Sulaymaniyah and Erbil governorates. You couldn't possibly start adding in bits of sort of the West Azerbaijan province from Iran and the Kurdistan province from Iran and so on, because these places are more mixed, completely different systems of government, and isn't that just going to be an impossibility to genuinely extend the borders of a Kurdish state beyond those three areas of Iraq?
I suppose it's hard for us to imagine it, but I think we're looking at it from the outside. More so on the people on the ground, most of them want it to happen. What is it? Where there's a will, there's a way.
Fair enough.
I think the situation in Iran is actually very different as well. The Kurds' experience in Iran has not been the same degree of repression and negativity that they have had in other parts of the region.
No, that's true, and they haven't required the same level of international protection, have they?
Not at all.
If all of the 4 countries with major Kurdish minorities were liberal democracies rather than 2 in a state of civil war, 1 near to a dictatorship, and whatever it is that Turkey represents these days, if they were all liberal democracies, we wouldn't be having this conversation, really. The problem here is the government systems of those countries discriminating at sometimes against minorities and not being democracies. If they're all democracies, then the case for a Kurdish escape those types of states would disappear.
Thank you. John, I'm going to come to you in a moment to close this topic. Just a few more comments that people have made on Twitter so far. David Jeffrey at @DavidJeffrey_ says that we should pay attention to what Turkey wants when Turkey starts to pay attention to women's rights. He also says that he's actually learning things tonight, which is good. We are, of course, an educational outlet as well as various other things. Pyro Kill the Keeper, it's wonderful, at Pyroanus. This is far too civil so far. It's not normally like this. We'll do our best to make the next point slightly less agreeable then, if that helps. Chris Latimer, the Kurds took the fight to Islamic State. They are fine people and they deserve independent status. That's at Thy Name is Chris 1. And where are we? William Henwood at WG Henwood. Heavens, Islamic State being defeated by women. Wow, we need more women in the Kurdish army. And Adam Hawkes points out, I find it amusing that the UK has a say about who is or isn't a nation when our old motto seemed to be, I want that country, let's take it over. John, to close this topic.
Yeah, right. There is. I'm not going to argue there aren't problems with the making or the remaking of a Kurdish state, but I think something the British government can do is show its general support, even if it does annoy Turkey a bit. I mean, there's not going to be no quick solutions for this. It's not going to suddenly happen, especially with the wars currently raging in the Middle East. But I think in time, we can, with a little help, there can be a good conclusion to all of this.
Thank you very much indeed, John. Thank you all for your comments. And now it's the laser selection process to find out who is going next. Oh, and I dropped them all. I'm doing well here. It is going to be Adrian. This is your topic. So if you'd like to tell us what it is and introduce it, please.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to talk about tax dodging, which, of course, we've had the report about HSBC this week. Which has been found to be, among other things, helping people who are not just dodging tax, but are also bag runners for dictators, people dealing in blood diamonds, people dealing in cocaine, and even a few Al-Qaeda financiers. So, you know, the litany of appalling financial misdeeds is absolutely as long as ever, and what I wanted to talk about is how we seem to have developed a culture where tax is no longer seen as, Professor Bill Black put it, the price we pay for civilization, but rather is seen as something which people boast about avoiding, particularly the rich. And you know, again, we see all these arrangements for offshoring, for moving companies abroad. We've seen a very liberal regime in terms of multinationals and where they can move their tax and pay their tax or not, as the case may be. And that particularly we have so many tax havens around the world, many of which are actually British Crown territories. But when you actually look at it, with the level of deregulation in this country, arguably the biggest tax haven now in the world is London, and the city of London itself. It's right on our doorstep. So I would like to talk about what needs to be done to change that and to move back towards a situation where people pay their dues and render unto Caesar.
Thank you.
What do you say should be done,
Adrian? Well, I'll just ask Leon to come in to comment on this topic in general first, and then I'll come back to you, Adrian, to tell us what kind of things you think need to happen. Leon.
Okay, right. Firstly, I will apologise for not saying anything on the last one. I literally know
There's no
nothing.
need.
I literally know nothing about Kurdistan, and I'm very bad with foreign affairs. So I just thought it's better not to bother. On this topic, well, firstly, the thing I'd say is I don't think people are boasted about tax avoidance. Otherwise, it wouldn't be such a shock when it comes out, and there wouldn't be big debates in Parliament about it. So I don't think anybody's boasting about it, unless, of course, they're boasting about the normal working people having ISAs. They might boast about that and say, "Oh, look at me, I'm saving money without paying tax on it." When you talk about the City of London being a kind of tax haven, I'm quite glad that the financial centre of Britain has, one of the financial centres of Europe actually as well, has a competitive tax policy. But I think the solution, frankly, to a lot of our bills is to put tax down. We've had it quite high for quite a few years. Labour tried to whack it up to see if that would work. We had it up in the 70s. That didn't work. I don't think clamping down on people will actually do it. Somebody told me about the dinner party analogy the other day, or the dinner table analogy, where, I apologise if this takes a while to explain. A group of people go and have a meal. The people on the lowest incomes pay the least, and the people on the highest incomes pay the most. Everybody's quite happy, that works out nicely. They go back the next time, and the people on the lowest income say, well, actually, I think you should pay a bit more to that. And they say, well, I'm already paying the most. Why should I pay more? Well, because you should. So instead of doing that, they toddle off and go to another table. I'm not saying you just roll over and take it from anyone who's rich, but don't try and alienate people. We've already seen France try to clamp down, supposedly, on these sorts of things, whacking tax up, talking tough on these things, and it ruined business in France. Now, France, there's lower tax rate. Again, it's got rid of the 75% tax. So I honestly, well, it's nothing new, and I have to be quite honest. I'm really bored of this issue.
Adrian.
Can I come back in on that before Adrian gets a word in on what he'd like to do about it?
I could see you scowling at me.
Go on, Martin. Go on.
Sorry, often one hears this conflation between tax avoidance and tax evasion, one of which is criminal, one of which is possibly undesirable, possibly desirable, depending on your point of view, depending on whether it's you paying the tax or not. But Leon is talking about tax rates. You know, the French were not doing a clampdown on people who were failing to pay tax they were legally required to pay. They were raising the tax rate to something very high. You know, the level of tax and whether or not people are avoiding it and whether or not people are evading it are three different things. And I'm very surprised to hear a conservative conflating high tax with tax avoidance clampdowns with tax evasion.
I'm only 20. Leave me alone. I'm still learning.
Well, here's a point specifically on that, made by David Jeffrey. The more complex a tax system, the more likely people will be to find loopholes. And isn't it the case, Martin, that whenever you start to change around tax rates or introduce new and different ways of taxing things, you are essentially introducing new loopholes or fewer incentives for people to pay it?
Well, one man's loophole is another man's carefully balanced social policy. But I think that all of these complexities in the tax law and in other laws are just designed to be exploited by people, and we should have simpler systems. That's very different from saying we should have low tax or high tax, but it means that there are fewer opportunities for people who can afford accountants to take advantage of their ability to afford accountants.
Okay, thank you. Adrian, what do you think needs to be done?
Well, I'd like to see an actually more active policy by the government to close the loopholes that Martin's just referred to. It's actually in the last few years gone quite the opposite way. If you go back to, I think it was 2011, there was a change in the Finance Act that whereas previously, if, for example, a British-based company had profits that it declared for activities in, say, Brazil, and if, say, the Brazil tax rate was lower than the UK's, it had to pay the balance of that difference to the UK Treasury. That was abolished, which meant that you could then go and declare profits in tax havens and have to pay nothing at all to either, say, Brazil or the UK government. That was at a time of the start of the austerity programme, and is estimated to cost the British Treasury somewhere between 10 and 15 billion pounds a year. So that makes no sense at all, and is simply financing big business and the rich. And when Leon says, tax has been too high, I don't want to tax ordinary people higher. We'd actually like to see, in the long term, at any rate, a big shift from indirect taxes like VAT, which affect the vast majority of less well-off people, to more direct taxes, and to be tackling that at the high end of the wealth spectrum and the income spectrum. Because if you look at the last few years, we have seen an absolutely exponential growth in wealth being held in the hands of a tiny number of people. I'm not talking about the top 20 or 30%, I'm talking about the top 1%, even within that. I mean, you've probably seen some of the things that Oxfam have been doing about how, for example, 5 families own more wealth in the UK than the poorest 14 million people put together. If you actually started to close some of these loopholes, ordinary people wouldn't need to pay as much tax. So it is the fact that we are having an elite creaming off large amounts of money, absolutely obscene amounts of money, which have been, to my mind, expropriated from the people who have been creating it in the first place, the workers and the employees in our services and industries, and you're left with a situation where the imbalance is dreadful, and the system is very much encouraging that process to get worse.
Okay, Adrian, I've got a couple of... this is a subject that's been on my timeline a lot today, and I've done a bit of research, and here are 3 pieces of information for you, which I wonder if you'd like to comment on them based on what you've just said. Now, the Financial Secretary to the Treasury tweeted that HMRC's yield from compliance in 2010-11 was £17 billion, and that this year it's £26 billion. That's up £9 billion. The number of prosecutions by HMRC in 2010 was 165. This year it's 1,174. And that when the highest tax rate was 50% a couple of years ago, we got in 38 billion, and now it's been reduced to 45%. We're getting in 46 billion. Is that not all good news?
Some of it is, and I welcome the fact that, as we know, there have been a few more tax inspectors deployed over the last few years, and this government, and I think, to be fair, it was the Liberal Democrat part of it that was particularly pushing that, to be fair to them. But tax evasion, if they've got that up to 26 billion that they've got back through compliance, great. But on one estimation, the gap is 120 billion a year. That's absolutely exponential, and the fact that they've been able to claw a little bit of that back, set against a culture and a climate where big companies like Vodafone are still getting billions of pounds, written off in tax that they've owed, then it is just not working. And I would say that this idea that if you cut tax, the rich suddenly start to pay it. Well, what's that actually saying? That is actually saying, when it's higher, they are actually avoiding their tax. So I would like to see, rather than cutting it, that we actually go after them and make sure that they pay what they're due.
Okay, Leon, I think you wanted to say something at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I was at a debate last Monday where a Green Party speaker was there, and he was saying pretty much the same thing. So I have come to the conclusion that the Green Party doesn't do its tax policy based on realism and actually the rate it gets taxed, the income of tax. It actually does it based on ideology. I'm convinced of that now.
Adrian's not here representing the Green Party. He's
not. He's a Green parliamentary candidate, so he may be speaking from his own point of view, but he is a parliamentary candidate at the end of the day. Though these points of view could influence policy after May. So I think.
Well, Leon, I will hold my hands up and say that yes, yeah, I do it from an ideological base as much as anything else. I have particular values that I support, and that's why I've chosen my particular party.
But do you not think that it's better to look at the money that you're getting rather than basically saying to people, oh, look at us, we're kicking the rich? I mean, you say if you put income tax up, then the rich are avoiding it. Yeah, they are avoiding it by going to different countries. That's how they're avoiding it. So how do you plan to get money off rich people when they don't live in Britain? You can't. That means you will have to put the tax up on the poorest.
No, because you can clamp down on the loopholes that people have been using to avoid paying tax. We have one of the most liberal tax regimes in this country, in the whole world. As you said earlier yourself, you said you were quite happy that the City of London has become a tax haven.
You can't take money off people that don't live in Britain.
Okay,
you can't take that money off.
I'm going to ask you to pause on that one. I've got a few comments, then I'm going to go to John. Quite a few comments, in fact. Alessia, at Upon a Cloud, another former guest. Historical facts of the day. The Magna Carta that everyone likes comes from barons fed up with paying too much tax. And she also makes the point that a substantial element of the English Civil Wars was related to taxation levied by the king. David Jeffrey, the top 3,000 people pay more income tax than the bottom 9 million. Damn that 1%. Michael Gady at Got Four Wheels. Hello, Michael. The simple fact is people want to keep more of their money and not lose it to taxation. On the other hand, Bruce Tollerfield says, Adrian, preach. Within that 1%, that's the issue, and they're not going away without a fight. So a number of points there. John.
Yeah, thank you. Firstly, can I just address this 1% thing? Because I hear this get thrown by a lot. To be in the 1% in all the world, you need £800,000 in assets, not even in disposable income. So saying the 1% is kind of silly when we live in the UK. We probably have more of the 1% here than, proportionally, most of Southeast Asia. Anyway, the point of this was tax avoidance, tax evasion. We've also talked a lot about tax rates. Tax evasion is a crime. You commit a crime, you get punished for it. Tax avoidance is the result of us having a stupid tax system that no one really understands. I agree partially with what several people have said. We need to close the loopholes, simplify our tax system. I've always been a fan of a flat tax, to be honest. As for tax rates, Leon mentioned the City of London becoming a tax haven. It's a tax haven because lots of people have come here and now pay tax here. I think, in combination with closing all the loopholes and punishing tax evasion, we need to set tax rates very low. That way we won't be punishing the poor by making them pay for the rich, but we will be attracting lots of business and lots of people to come here, and that will make up the difference. Because lots of people who talk about we need to put tax rates up, we need to get the billionaires, we need to get the 1%, but they're not concentrating on what the ordinary person is paying. The ordinary person in the UK spends January, February, March, April, May, into June paying taxes to the state before they earn anything for themselves. And that astounds me, how we can be happy with that situation. The postman can get up at 4 in the morning, work till 1 in the afternoon, and then not earn anything for himself until June. I mean, the UK's tax system is silly. We need to put it down, we need to chop it apart, have a very simple tax system, have a very low system that's fair to everyone.
Thank you very much. A couple of comments before I ask Martin and Leon, who want to make some brief additions. Before I'm just looking at the time before Adrian closes this topic. Salman Anwar, when France increased their income tax, they flooded to the UK. Guess who got the money? The Treasury.
That's my point.
Chris G, Adrian, if it could be shown lower tax rates generate more, would you still support higher rates for reasons of social cohesion? So hold your answer to that one, Adrian. You can open your closing with that, and that's from Chris G. And there's some other debates going on here between our audience, and a point here made by Tax Dodging H at Captain_Facetious.
That was fast.
Yes. As long as Amazon continues to give me low prices, they can avoid tax until the end of days. Martin.
Controversial.
Yeah.
Got caught on Twitter there myself. I one of the things that concerns me is that this is a rule of law issue. We're not going after enough tax evaders, and we have people disparaging tax avoiders. People who are not breaking the law are being spoken of as though they were criminals, and I think we should only do that about people who are actually criminals. And we'll have the same thing, I'm sure, in relation to benefit fraud later in this discussion. A side issue that I care about a lot in relation to tax and tax havens is the constant attack on beneficial ownership. Whenever people go after these tax havens in Switzerland or Liechtenstein or the Caymans or whatever, you often hear people very concerned about the fact that companies can be owned anonymously, and their attempts to weaken that. And the problem there is that it's not just the drug dealers and the terrorists and the rest of it. It's NGOs and campaign groups and others who need that confidentiality to protect themselves from oppressive regimes in much less fortunate countries than we are in, end up getting caught in that net as well. If you require every organisation to tell you who owns and who controls it, then you mean that you've got to go to the government before you can start collaborating as an NGO or civil society organisation as well, and I think that is a dangerous and bad step to take. On the question of tax levels, one thing that concerns me also is the way that some people, particularly Adrian, are talking about the existence of wealth or income as a justification in itself for taxing them, rather than the need to pay for government services. Maybe I'm putting words into his mouth there, but do you think that taxes should just generally be higher, or do you think that we need them just to pay for government services?
Thank you very much indeed. Adrian can answer that in just a moment. Leon, your final comments.
Oh, sorry, I wasn't prepared then at all. Do you want to go to 8? Oh, no, sorry, because he's closing
this
the
is your
top.
final chance on
I got
this
really
one.
very confused then. Yeah, I think I possibly got myself confused before. Tax evaders, of course, arrest them, clamp down, find them. They're breaking the law at the end of the day. Tax avoidance is completely legal. So you may refer to them as loopholes. They are legal. If you want to close them, we can have that debate anyway. Close them. I suppose the reason I'm a bit annoyed about it is because I was watching Question Time the other night.
That's bound to make anyone annoyed. That's why you should watch this show instead.
It was more because they were all talking about it and they're all going, oh, well, we all want to close tax loopholes. And I thought, well, you're all MPs, so you can do it if you want. And it really got on my nerves, so I turned it off in outrage. And I've forgotten where I was going with that, so I'll just
That's fine. I think that's a good point to finish on.
Years of work to change these tax laws.
Adrian, obviously you've got that specific question, but some of the things people have added here. A confused ninja, Ian at a confused ninja. Tax rates do not make the tax system complicated. It's all the rules about what is income, what is deductible that add complexity. Cami Singh, Cameron Singh CL. In a rule of law governed society, the only way to fully stop tax avoidance is to close all loopholes and end most deductions. And Salman Anwar, it's not only big businesses and billionaires that try to avoid tax, small businesses do the same. But you do have that particular point that was put to you before, Adrian, and the one that Martin's mentioned. If you could be shown that lower tax rates generate more, would you still support higher rates for reasons of social cohesion?
Okay, there's a few obviously interlinked issues.
Yes.
So if I just very briefly, on tax evasion, I think that we really need to see a change that the British government can do a lot about in terms of what we do domestically, but also notwithstanding the fact that a lot, and I think it's around 18 out of 30 of the tax havens around the world are British Crown territories, where we do have some influence in getting them to change their financial regulations. In terms of where that then plays through to things like tax avoidance, the legal aspect of it, to my mind, okay, that's not illegal, but to my mind it is immoral. And the reason for that is linked to the final part, the final question about tax and what the purpose of tax is. Martin's right, yes, it should be to raise finance for public services. Okay. And that's very much something that I believe in. But there is another agenda here from my perspective, which is that, yes, to answer the question about social cohesion, we're now in a situation where Britain is still, I think, on various indices, either the 4th or 5th richest country in the planet, but it is either the second or first most unequal developed society, vying with the United States for top spot.
Brazil.
And from that perspective, we are heading towards a situation where you will have a breakdown in social cohesion when you have such an extreme gulf between the richest and poorest in society. So yes, I believe that taxation should be used to redress some of that balance. I'm not supporting or advocating absolute zero equality or whatever, but certainly the levels that we have now of wealth in terms of hundreds to ones and even thousands to ones are just unsustainable.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you all for your comments on this one. I've retweeted a few, including some interesting ones from Weird Times, who was a guest the other week, who is just pointing out how UK tax take is divvied up within the UK as well. So that's all on there. Now, what is our next topic? We have two left. Let's turn to the laser selection process. And the penultimate one is yours, Martin. Give us your introduction.
Okay. As some of you, probably most of you will be aware, there is a series of negotiations taking place between the European Union and the United States about trade. That is to reduce customs duties and to harmonise regulations on labour, the environment, product standards, and employment policy and things like that, and to set up new mechanisms for adjudicating disputes about investment. So many of these issues have been combined into a single deal. This is in the form of a treaty negotiated effectively in secret between Brussels and Washington. There are many treaties in the world. The UK is currently subject to about 10,000 of them and is incapable of calculating how many it's negotiating right now. And my issue here is, whereas some of the things in these treaties will be good for everyone, and some will be good for minorities, and some will be good for the majority, packaged together in these deals, there is always this notion of harmonising the relation between, say, America and Europe, or between different parts of Europe. And for every time that, say, the European Union standardizes on phone charges, so everyone has the same one, you can take them across borders, you'll have a situation like South Korea where the country will standardize on Internet Explorer for e-commerce, which means that users of Apple and Linux can't use their computers for online shopping. So my issue here is that secret negotiations without parliamentary involvement, without media involvement, are always going to lead to a situation where only very large, well-funded organizations, big businesses, can set the regulations that governments can agree to benefit themselves, and it will lock out small businesses, unions, environmental concerns, governments themselves, and individuals. So secrecy and a lack of democracy in international negotiations is privileging big business at the expense of the rest of society. That's my claim. And against it, people say, well, harmonization is a good thing, it'll increase the amount of trade, and I'm worried about who gets the benefits of the increase in that increased trade. And I think that that we should have the inefficiencies associated with more democratic scrutiny of trade negotiations.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to come to John in a sec. Just 2 comments so far. Salman Anwar, TTIP, oh my goodness, please, anything but this. I don't want to sleep just yet. Chris Latimer, time for me to represent the minority. I like TTIP. I think it would open the NHS up to competition and the sick would benefit. John?
Yes, lots to go on. Talking about TTIP first, because I refuse to call it anything else. If I can't have an opinion on it because I have no idea what it entails. I've yet to see a parliamentary debate where they're laid out the full consequences and the full range of measures that will be included within it. I agree a lot with Martin. I could talk forever about why I don't like the secrecy and non-democracy of the EU and all its secret deals, but I won't. I agree with Martin. There's been a shift in recent years away from democratic scrutiny of negotiations towards seemingly shadowy deals done that seem to only benefit big business. I mean, I'm a huge fan of business, but I'm an even bigger fan of democracy, and taking democratic scrutiny away from such an important issue as trade and the standards we hold our business to seems slightly dangerous.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. A couple of comments so far. Chris G. Martin, you can't expect individual countries to give up their negotiating positions during trade talks. And Salman Anwar agrees, but points out actually that TTIP negotiations aren't that secret, are they? After all, we do know that they're going on, and we do have some idea about what's being discussed. Adrian, did you want to add something on this?
Yes, I think in terms of TTIP, I think the only thing which might be useful, I don't know, I've just got a few things here in terms of harmonisation.
We're going to find a Green Party supporter at TTIP. Well,
no, you're not about to find that.
Okay.
One of the few good things about harmonisation, I believe that as of next year, thanks to the EU, we will not have lots of different ends on our electronic components. But in terms of TTIP itself, absolutely not. It is, to my mind, I would agree entirely with both John and Martin. The degree of secrecy is appalling. I heard a Green Party MEP talking about how MEPs have been allowed very limited access to see what is being discussed, and it involves going into a room in Brussels and getting 15 minutes to look at some documents, which they're not allowed to take out, and they're not allowed to talk about what's in them either. So it's absolutely scandalous that something which potentially has such an impact on our country and indeed on all other European countries is being done as a sort of deal behind closed doors. And in terms of what would appear to be emerging from it, I would agree. One of the things is obviously concern that harmonisation, particularly with the United States and Canada, but especially perhaps with the US, is that it will harmonise down to the lowest conceivable level, so that you may well have all sorts of pretty dodgy regulations from the United States about food and what can go into food being transposed to Europe. And then just briefly, the other thing which I'm very concerned about is Martin alluded to this, the state investor disputes mechanism, because not only does that give private multinationals the ability to sue sovereign governments for decisions which they democratically make about the ownership of their public services, it is also settled in secret courts. So we will never actually find out, for example, if they decide to fine the British government, in some cases hundreds of millions of pounds, because it's not allowed some American multinational the ability to bid for NHS services or for education services in the UK. We'll never know why the court found in favour of the complainant.
Okay, well, I'm going to disagree with Adrian.
Go on.
It is just not necessary for a government to choose what sort of plugs we use to connect two devices together. I know it is undesirable. It is undesirable for there to be winner-take-all markets with huge network effects, where the first company to get in there wins everything. And that is a reason for having competition policy and good antitrust enforcement. One of the very small number of things the EU actually does well. But for that to be embedded in some law, or even worse, a treaty, which is harder to change, will put us in the same sort of situation as South Korea, where people have to use Internet Explorer on Windows in order to do their online commerce. And so, the fact that you get standardized components for consumer electronics isn't worth it if the cost is that particular well-funded interests that can lobby well get to have their standard in there and make more money out of that and take a big chunk out of democracy in the process.
Okay, some of the points that people have raised online so far. Where are we? Yes, David Jeffrey. The EU Commission has said in relation to TTIP, privatisations are decided by governments themselves and not through free trade agreements. He also points out that if the Morning Star is against it, then I'm for it. A few points. Salman Anwar says, from the BBC, he's found a section on the NHS. EU Trade Commissioner Karel de Gucht, leading the European negotiating team, has denied there is a hidden agenda and the NHS might be undermined. He said, public services are always exempted. There is no problem about exemption. The argument is abused in your country for political reasons, but it has no grounds. There are other people who support what's being said here. They're talking about how... we got Bruce Tolfield. No, I've lost the comment. I'll come to you, John.
Gareth, can I respond to some of the comments from Twitter there?
I'll give you one in a moment. I'll go to John first, if that's okay. Because we've been waiting. Okay, John.
Yeah, we're now trusting the EU Commission, are we? Okay, fair enough. On giant international treaties, fair enough.
Well, they are the people leading the negotiations, aren't they?
No, the people who made the Irish do say things twice. The people who changed the EU covenant into a treaty so they could pass it without referendums.
I understand that you will have particular issues with the EU and how it works, but on this issue, it is the Commission that's leading the negotiations on behalf of the EU, isn't it? So, yeah. I mean, you would hope they'd be the people who know what's going on.
You'd hope. Anyway, and someone earlier mentioned you couldn't expect a country to give up its trade negotiating place for democratic something or other. One of the tweets you mentioned earlier, we have done for the past however many years. The UK has not been able to say how many treaties it's currently negotiating because lots of them are negotiated for us. We are now in a very dangerous situation, the UK as a nation, where people can decide things for us. I mean, Adrian mentioned the standardisation of what we plug our electronic devices into. It's just a list thing, fair enough. But what else is being decided? We as the people who elect our government to represent us, have to know what our government is deciding with other nations. Otherwise, what's the point?
Okay, Leon, you wanted to comment something before I asked Martin to come back. In fact, Martin, can you hold on to your comments to close this debate in a few minutes' time? Is that okay?
Yes.
Leon.
If no one minds me being perhaps a little bit rude, I think there's two types of people against things like TTIP: those who aren't in favour of international free trade, and those who are against the EU. They're not necessarily the same thing. I think you could have a little Venn diagram to put into place. There's a lot of bluster and a lot of fuss about it, and it's the arguments in Britain have actually got nothing to do with the treaty. It usually comes down to either the EU or the NHS, and they're the only two things. This is just the freeing up.
I didn't mention either of them.
Well, I didn't hear what you said, but I'm not talking about what you said.
He's talking in general, yeah.
Yeah. I'm just talking about the things that I've heard and the things I've read. Sorry if I didn't make that clear. But no, I've lost my train of thought now. Yes.
Well, I'll come back to you in a moment. Adrian, there's been a lot said so far. Some people are agreeing with you, but naturally I can't see their comments on Twitter all of a sudden, having read them and retweeted them. But they are there. Adrian.
That's good to know. If I can just say, I did notice somebody saying that I'd said that one size fits all is a good thing. Only in respect, I can assure you, of mobile phones. I'm not actually in favour of over-standardisation. I'm very much in favour of variety. But I do think that when you have a situation where different companies, in producing things which we all use on an everyday basis, produce very specialised leads and so on, it's perhaps actually a good piece of consumer protection to say that we need to have some sort of standardisation in respect of that.
Okay, I'm sorry to pause you. I'm sorry to pause you for just 1 second. I'm just warning you that half of my electricity's gone off. So I'm going to go blank for a moment whilst I sort that out. But you all please continue the debate for a second.
Sure. But I think in respect of the wider issue of who gets to choose how we trade, it is important that democracies are able to take their own decisions. I think somebody earlier said it's up to governments whether they privatise or nationalise things. Well, in actual fact, TTIP and things like that may well tie governments' hands to actually keeping things in the private sector, regardless of what people want. And that's one of the things that concerns me, for example, with the NHS, that if we sign up for TTIP, although there's all this talk about opt-outs, that there will be legal routes for private companies and American companies to sue the British government in order to force them to open up the NHS, or it could be the education services, to private competition. And we're seeing things like that where there are existing bilateral free trade agreements where countries like India are being sued over their health policies on cigarette smoking. You're similarly seeing situations where there's one of the Central American companies is being sued over its environmental protection by a Canadian company. So, free trade deals like this are not necessarily a good thing.
Okay, Adrian, you'd be hard-pressed to get a cigarette paper between Adrian and my position on TTIP.
Okay, are you closing this? Are you closing this
yes,
now?
Yes,
okay,
yes. Apart from his idea that governments should help design mobile phone charging standards and similar technical standards, I think we're very much in agreement. But there seems as though most of the people in this debate are in agreement. It's the people on Twitter who've been commenting who ought to be in here arguing against us. So someone said that it's in the Morning Star. The Morning Star's against it, and therefore he should be in favour of it. I think that it speaks for itself. It's not. There are some things that are true even if printed in the Daily Mail. There are some things that are false even if printed in the Morning Star, and vice versa. Carol de Gucht said that the NHS would be protected from TTIP, and this may or may not be the case. The point is that there are other things in it apart from the NHS, and whoever it was who said that the British debate is being diverted by this issue, I think was right. But whoever it was on Twitter who said that you can't expect governments to reveal their negotiating positions, well, if that is necessary for democracy, then maybe we should expect governments to reveal their negotiating positions, and that there should be a very different way of obtaining this kind of international cooperation. If international cooperation requires this kind of secrecy and has the effect of empowering a very small number of well-endowed commercial actors, then maybe we need to change the way we do international cooperation and have the situation where governments can't really negotiate in secret. That might be a price worth paying.
Thank you very much, Martin. Thank you for your comments. I'll read a few out before we go to our final topic, which is Leon's. Bruce Tollerfield talks about, this is any kind of related, he says, but competitiveness does not necessarily mean better for the consumer. He works for a cleaning company who won a bid to clean North Devon Hospital. They won the bid by undercutting their other bidders, and the quality of equipment has plummeted. We're constantly short-staffed, etc. In short, it's worse. It's only one case, but it could be more common than that.
Consumer there is the taxpayer, not the patient, unfortunately.
A confused ninja. I would be concerned about similar agreements made where tobacco companies are suing the Australian government over plain packaging laws. Salman Anwar, the NHS is exempt. Stop scaremongering. Weird Times is concerned about the secrecy around all of this. And I mean, many comments here. William Brown, yes. If TTIP start looking at food, especially GM crops, and lungs for public consumption, I still want haggis, but the US of A don't. And it's an important point, isn't it? Right, thank you very much. Our final topic, then, is going to be led by Leon.
Hello. Right. I was initially going to be talking about actually how useless I thought Labour have been in their first month of the election year, but I read something today that upset me quite a bit, and it's about these changes to the sickness benefits. The headlines are about the obese, quote unquote. I'm technically obese, but I don't think it applies to me. And it really bothers me because and I don't know which idiot has come up with this idea, but they're talking about punishing people who are obese, as the headline goes, if they refuse treatment. The policy also goes further and says those who may have drug or alcohol addictions, if they refuse treatment, they lose their benefits if they are on them. And I can't help but think that's completely wrong. And I was really quite glad when I saw Sarah Wollaston, the Conservative MP and former GP, who actually agrees with my position, and she wrote to Number 10 to say that it's a ridiculous and completely indefensible policy. A fantastic guy who I know of called Danny Bowman, I can't remember how you pronounce his surname, who was leading a campaign on mental health this year, actually said that this could have implications on the treatment of mental health. At the end of the day, I mean, drug and alcohol. I can speak from personal experience when it comes to alcohol. I have depression, and when I get depressed, I drink. If that was to progress into alcoholism, if I'm not in a fit state to get treatment for the actual underlying condition, does that mean I get kicked for it? Apparently so, if this policy was to be put into place. I just think, I can't help but think that as UKIP are getting more popular, we're trying to out UKIP. Hang on a minute, John, don't scowl at me. I'm about to defend you almost here. It's not come from UKIP, but I think some of the more reactionary elements of the Conservative Party are thinking, let's try and out UKIP by looking nasty. And going back into the nasty party mindset is not going to win us a general election, and it will harm lots of people and potentially kill people as well.
Thank you very much indeed. And of course, naturally, I can't do anything here. A couple of points made so far before I open it up to the panel. Bruce Tollerfield, are patients not impacted by poorer quality of services? Most patients are taxpayers. Sorry, that links back to the last one. So forget that so far. Populist idea. It's not of a standard for where the Conservatives should be. Salman Anwar, he's agreeing with you there, Leon.
He tweeted my position the wrong way round.
Did I? I'm so sorry. I'll sort that out in a moment. Let me just say, because I don't often express a personal opinion here, but I've worked with people who do have addictions of various varieties, and I have to say, I think many of the welfare reforms the government that I support has put through have been with absolutely the right intentions, and many have been done well. But I think this is a fag packet idea, and it's not something I think actually benefits us, and it certainly won't help those that we aim to help with our welfare reforms. But John, is this idea simply trying to out UKIP?
First of all, I'll agree with you and Leon. I'm not at all sold on this current proposal. Has it come from UKIP? I really don't think it has. I've noticed amongst my party, especially in the last year, there's been a big move amongst some sections against various welfare reforms. I mean, Douglas Carswell very recently was saying he had severe problems with bedroom tax, amongst other things, or the spare room subsidy, whatever you call it. I think this is not to do with us, because say we're trying to look nasty, therefore try UKIP. Just randomly doing nasty things doesn't mean you make you look more like UKIP. You just make yourself look nasty, because lots of things we do, I get called lefty by various Tories on the internet all the time because apparently we're economically left of people. We have our own internet. Oh, never mind. But we have our own set of policies, and people often try to outdo particular ones of those, mainly immigration. This one, I really don't know where this has come from. It seems very left field, beyond anything the Tories have tried to do already. It's nothing we support. It seems very pointless and counterproductive all over, to be honest.
It's crazy.
Thank you. Right, Adrian.
Well, I don't want to contribute to an outbreak of harmony, but I would agree with both John and Leon. I think it's really quite a wicked sort of statement that's come out this week, a proposal, and you know it completely ignores the fact that most people who have these sort of conditions, which David Cameron, who I think led on this, was talking about, will have tend to have all sorts of other issues playing in their lives. It could be poverty, it could be mental health problems, and that very often actually a refusal of treatment is actually part of the condition. And to start sanctioning some people and leaving them with absolutely no money or no means to look after themselves is going to be extremely wicked and counterproductive. It's very cruel. I don't know that it is that left field, though, because if you look at what has been happening with Atos and with some of the welfare reforms over the last few years, this sort of experience has become more and more common for a lot of people. There's something like 500,000 people sanctioned last year. That's people left with absolutely no money for significant periods of time. It's one of the reasons that food banks are being used so often. It's all very well to talk about people making choices. Very few people choose to be a drug addict. Very few people choose to become an alcoholic, and very few people choose a lifestyle which causes obesity. It is very often a product of all sorts of other factors which are outside their control and demand compassion, not this sort of stigmatization which we've seen, which really is worthy of the sun or something like that. It's not worthy of a government.
Thank you. Martin?
So Adrian has slightly broadened the issue there to include Atos and things like that. There were 2.5 million people on disability benefits when the coalition came in. I know Labour was planning to send them to a new doctor, and the number of people on that particular benefit has been, or on the equivalent of that benefit, has been significantly reduced recently. But the point of departure for this was people who were treated as so obese that they could not work and therefore were not on a sort of job seekers allowance style benefit. My real dispute there would be with classifying 100,000 people in Britain as so fat they can't work. I just find it extremely difficult to imagine that that figure of 100,000 isn't as inflated as the 2.5 million was. People get worried about benefit fraud, and it's a very, very small amount of money in terms of the government's overall budget. It's like £50 million a year against job seekers allowances, but it's a very large number of people taking a very small amount of money improperly from the government in a way that's illegal. And in the case of obesity being treated as a form of disability such that you can't work, I think that we may find yet again that a very large proportion, a surprisingly large proportion of the people involved have been miscategorized and ought not to be regarded as too fat to work. I wouldn't like to be called too fat to work, and there are some people who've been told that's their fate, who really ought to be getting to work. But it's for people who are actually too fat to work, who can't actually walk anywhere. Of course, they're disabled, and there's not a lot we can do about that until they lose weight somehow.
Thank you. All this talk of too fat for things is making me feel both awkward and hungry. Some of the comments that people have made so far.
Call these things what they are.
Yes. Alessia, stupid question, but isn't the most important thing in addiction to get the people out of it? Salman Anwar, not a terribly weird idea though. Its basis is in helping people out of their situation. Sometimes they need that little push. Chris G, if you're permanently pissed or high, how can you prove that you are a job seeker and therefore entitled to that benefit? We also have SD, the gossip at S_debate_news, pointing out viewers complain too much harmony, petition to have someone hit with a rake. I'm prepared to hit someone with a rake if we continue with this broad agreement. Does anyone want to add anything? John?
Yeah, we talk about wanting to get people to work. We want to get everyone back to work, and looking more at everyone to see if anyone has been miscategorized is good. But people were talking about how can they be called job seekers allowance, perhaps we should give them a little push. Taking all their money away is not a little push.
No.
It's taking away everything they have and throwing them off a cliff. A much better idea would be sending. Martin mentioned the Labour idea of sending everyone to a new doctor. I think that's a very good idea, to be honest. Sorry, pardon.
I mean, that was proposed by Labour before the election and not implemented, but they basically didn't budget for all those new GP appointments, as they sort of cynically expected, and they're not here to defend themselves, no one here from Labour to say this, cynically expected that people wouldn't turn up to these interviews and they'd go on a job seekers allowance instead. And the vast numbers of people who disappeared from disability benefit roles seem to bear that out. I don't know what the figures are, but it's gone down from the 2.5 million it was, which is an extraordinary number considering the overall population of the UK. But it was the Tories and the Lib Dems who implemented they choose the GP that you get sent to.
Exactly. I think that was generally a good idea. Perhaps some of the execution has not been what everyone would have wanted, but the priority has to be trying to get people who can work to work and getting people who are generally disabled or unable to work the help they need. And I agree, 2.5 million seemed quite a lot considering we had a very low population where that's a section of it.
Well,
okay, there's far too much agreement here.
Gareth, I remember what I was actually originally going to say. One, I'm very sceptical about a lot of the benefits, and I think that the moral effect of benefit fraud is extremely coercive, and that we should, as the rule of law issue, we should be locking up people who are defrauding the system, just as we should be locking up tax evaders. But the real problem with people being falsely categorised as unable to work is that we don't give enough respect to people in our society who do jobs that are not glamorous. The street cleaners and people working in cafes, and I don't mean to insult those people at all. Since we've had a meritocratic society in this country, there's not been enough noblesse oblige. There's not been enough respect from people who've made their way to the top to people who are never going to make their way out of the income bracket they're in. And it doesn't, it's a moral thing. Some people always treat their economic inferiors with respect and decency, and some people don't. It's not whether you're rich or poor or where you've come from. It's just a matter of personality. And there are not enough people who treat people in humble occupations with respect. And so people think, well, should I cut a few moral corners and go on disability benefit when I should benefit, or will I go out and be a bit of a sucker and earn a very small amount of money, and people look down on me? So if we've got to restore the dignity of labour, we will not have, or we'll still have these benefits problems.
Okay, some of the points people have made, some of the points people have made online about this one, David Jeffrey. Problem with benefit cheats is that they are highly localised, and it creates areas with a lack of ambition or drive, and that leads to crime, which is building on the points you made there. He also says, why do we want to get everybody into work? Why shouldn't we want to get everybody into work? They want. A basic income would make this easier. Chris G, I'm entitled, is a cancerous mindset which has become ingrained in our society and made us less competitive. A drug addict getting stoned and then wondering why he's unemployable, there's no sanction on that behaviour, he asks. And just the final point I'd like people to think about here, because Adrian raised the issue about sanctions. Obviously, in a system as large as the UK is dealing with, millions of people, there will always be stories where someone has been improperly sanctioned or something has gone wrong. But let's assume that those for whom a decision was taken that was within the rules. Is it not right that people who are claiming money from other taxpayers because they are not currently in work should be sanctioned if they don't meet their part of the bargain for looking for work or accepting work that's offered and appropriate? Is it not right that those sanctions exist?
Who are you asking?
Anyone who'd like to disagree with me.
I'll come in on that.
Do you disagree with the point, Leon?
Partly.
Okay, and then I'll come to Adrian, who I think probably disagrees with it more.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's mostly, in most circumstances, it's a good point. If I turn up and say, well, I can't do this, and they say, prove it, and I can't because actually I'm fibbing, well, I think that's fair enough. You don't get the money. It's as simple as that. But if you are in, it puts people who suffer with, for example, if people suffer with mental illness, what if they simply can't do it? What if they physically can't leave the house?
Yeah. But what I'm saying
Like
is,
that.
those who are able to meet their requirements and don't.
Oh, right, well-
I started off, if you remember, the caveat is put aside the ones where there's a poor decision taken or an improper decision taken.
Yeah.
We know that there are people who are not fulfilling their duty,
Yeah.
which the current government would say your duty is to actively look for work.
Yeah.
Why shouldn't sanctions exist for those who don't meet those requirements? That's my question.
I think I misjudged the question, so I think I agree with you.
Okay.
So I'll leave it to Adrian.
Can someone please disagree with that point?
I
was
will,
going to disagree.
Adrian,
I will significantly disagree.
please.
Somebody mentioned the basic income as a possible solution, and I know that's a whole other topic, and I won't go on about that. But if we had a basic income in this country where everybody got some sort of basic state income each week, that would do away with all this. You wouldn't have a situation where you would have people needing to be in a situation, as Martin was talking about, where they are desperate and potentially commit some sort of fraud. And you know, from the perspective of work itself, somebody else, I think on Twitter, asked, you know, why do we want to get everybody back to work? Well, the bottom line is that if you look at the degree of mechanization that's going on, we're going to have to completely recalibrate how we do work in this country and how we view work, because, you know, there was an American study a little while ago that showed that by 2030, maybe a little bit later than that, 2035, 47% of the jobs that we have around now will become mechanized. And we see that now already in shops with the so-called fast lane. Google are bringing out the driverless cars, and they're talking about driverless taxis. There's a whole range of work which is simply going to disappear. And unless we start to think more creatively about where people get their income from and how society rewards work and how it values people, we're going to be in a situation where this sort of thing is going to become really, really impossible to resolve. And from the point of view of things like benefits and benefit fraud and sanctions, I mean, I'm sorry, but it's not right that there's just been a few instances of people being sanctioned incorrectly. It is quite endemic, and if you actually look at how the system works, you know, if people going through reassessments with Atos and so on, we're not always seeing GPs. They were often seeing nurses and other people who did not actually understand the conditions that they were assessing. I had a personal friend who was sanctioned for a whole year for a meeting which he didn't attend because he wasn't told about it, and it actually didn't happen. But apparently you could have meetings that did not physically take place. The system is absolutely cruel. And if you actually look at how a lot of it works, it is designed deliberately to baffle and move people off of benefits when in actual fact they should still be on disability support of one sort or another.
Thank you very much, Adrian. Martin, John, any final comments before Leon closes this debate?
John?
I mean, this is the problem we face. Not only we do have the short-term problem of getting Atos and such like to work to avoid fraud and a culture of, oh, well, it's easier for me not to work than to work. We also face the long-term problem of the jobs lots of people once had are no longer available, and the jobs, those jobs are getting less and less as we go on. The government faces a very difficult decision. They're basically going to have to try and move as many people off the benefit system while keeping it fair, and at the same time increasing educational standards to prepare people for the world ahead. So I don't really envy them. I'm not entirely sure the current government has got it right, to be honest. ATOS perhaps was a step in the right direction, re-looking at everyone. But as Adrian mentioned, some people were seen by nurses, some people weren't seen by fully qualified professionals, and that's a problem for reassessing people. And at the same time, we look at education, which I won't get into, but again, everything hasn't been completely perfect there.
Yeah,
Thank you very much. Martin?
I reiterate Adrian's point about mechanisation. I think that is a huge problem. But as I say, it's a lack of respect that is driving a lot of the problems in the benefit system and elsewhere. If we can't make a fiscally sustainable benefit system, which is something we certainly don't have at the moment, there is no hope. A fiscally sustainable welfare state, including pensions. There's no hope for an environmentally sustainable economy. If we can't do enough self-denial to keep the costs of this system, something that will work for the long term, then we just don't have a hope with the planet's resources.
Thank you very much. Okay, Leon, your turn to close this topic, please.
Thank you. First, what I'm going to do is I'm going to respond to a couple of tweets that I saw on Twitter about this. They're both from Chris G, who I tend to agree with. I have a lot of respect for the guy, and I think I think he's right on a lot of things. On this one, I personally think he's wrong. I mean, one of them, he said, a drug addict getting stoned and then wondering why he's unemployable, there's no sanction on that behaviour. Well, I mean, if he's a drug addict getting high all the time because he enjoys it and he expects to be paid for that, well, fair enough, but I don't think there's a lot of drug addicts that are like that who have disability benefits. I think it's the same with alcoholics. I mean, my uncle died from his alcoholism, for Christ's sake. He certainly didn't enjoy it. He was depressed, very, very depressed, and wasn't getting the treatment that he needed and died because of it. So I don't think it's a case that people enjoy it or anything like that. I think everybody's made some good points on it. I think Adrian's right that this particular policy that's been ventured is, frankly, just, at worst, it's a very, very cruel policy idea. I'm really not too keen on it at all. John's right, we need to get more people off of welfare. It is about getting more people off welfare and into work. But, of course, we have to be fair about it and not just chucking people off because it'll make the figures look good. And I think Martin's right as well in saying that a lack of respect in those sorts of lines of work that has caused this. People thinking, well, I don't want to do that work. I don't want to do that work, so I'll try and, like you say, cut a few corners. I think that's completely correct. I've heard people bring on about it before saying, oh, I wouldn't do that job. But on this particular policy, I actually think you're right, Gareth. It's the back of a fag packet. I don't even think it's based on good intentions. I don't think there are any real intentions in it at all, to be quite honest. I think it's possibly just a panicked reaction, possibly coming up to the election. I've no idea, but whoever's come up with this idea needs a sacking, frankly.
I'm afraid someone put a lot of thought into it, or it would never have ended up on the BBC.
Well, you're probably right there.
So,
well, you say that, I don't have that much faith in them.
Calm yourselves, gentlemen. You're breaking our rules here. That's the end. Leon gets the last word, and he's just had it. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you all at home for watching, or wherever you are, for watching and tweeting and putting our guests on the spot and making them think. Thank you to each of my guests tonight. Thank you very much, John. Thank you very much, Leon, who vanished for a brief moment there. Thank you, Martin, and thank you, Adrian. Very, very grateful to all of you for your time. Just a reminder to everybody, for our guests here and all of you at home, our website is up and you are very welcome to blog on anything you like. If you've written something for someone else, we don't mind publishing it as well. That's absolutely fine. We welcome views from all over the political spectrum. That's the whole point of this. But here is something we would love you to get involved with. It's an idea called My Manifesto, and we would like you to write in no more than 140 words, so think big fat tweet, one that hopefully won't be sanctioned, 140 words, one idea you'd like to see in election manifestos this year. And let's see if we can get a debate going around ideas for manifestos, things that will actually help change or improve our country. So thank you very much indeed. We'll be back next week. We already have one guest lined up, and that's the return of Lily for Labour. If you'd like to appear next week, get in touch ASAP, reserve your place. Thank you very much. We hope you enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Good night.